presenters and everybody who watches the stream later. We welcome you to another Thursday live stream out of many countries. Let's see who joins us. And I would reach around for a quick introduction. My name is Ralph. I'm streaming out of Bangkok, and I'm very happy that we are doing this so regularly. Gary, could you go next?
Hi, I'm Gary Garcia from the Philippines. I'm with GEG Ortigas and GEG Malolos.
James, go ahead.
Hi, I'm James Bala. I'm from Kuala Lumpur. I run the Teach Me KL, and I'm a Google innovator.
And now Eric, who was a special guest in our first stream, and now he is a steady part of it. I'm very happy to have you here.
Okay. I believe Eric is having some problems. Yeah, okay, Eric's having some connection problems.
So we have chosen the following topic for today, which is a very dear one, as our students are all little human beings with needs. And we might be rather surprised what we can encounter sometimes when we are in the classroom busy with our lesson in our head and somebody is acting out. So my first question would be, what is your experience? What have you experienced in your classroom? What was maybe shocking or surprising, or what you weren't prepared for? Eric, if you are okay, you can start and quickly introduce yourself, because you had a short connection problem there.
Still got a connection problem.
Did you say something?
Oh.
Yeah, off and on. You're talking to me now?
Yes, please quickly introduce yourself. Okay. And I was asking if you had any experiences with kids acting out or starting to cry or similar things.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so yeah, I'm Eric. I'm in Korea, and yeah, I mean, there are problems sometimes that I.
Oh dear.
I think there's really a connection problem with.
Yeah, is it specifically?
We gotta put up with it.
Did you say you were having problems too?
I'm not sure. I think I can see the screens fine of everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, I can see everybody else. I think it is Eric, unless I'm having a problem. But everybody else seems fine.
Well, that's the beauty of live streaming, and
I should just yeah. So maybe
Okay. Thanks, Eric. Unfortunately, he's having connection difficulties, isn't he, Ralph? So we'll put him into the back room for a while.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Maybe if you have a good story, we can start off with, James.
Yeah, I mean, I think what really scares me is the actual shock of things when you realize the students' lives outside your classroom. Because often
I can start.
Okay. Is my connection bad too?
I hear you very clearly.
Okay. So
James, go ahead.
The big challenge is really when you discover the children's lives outside your classroom, because they behave a certain way in the classroom, and often they often don't want things to go badly. So when you discover the problems they're having outside the classroom, you're quite shocked, because they behave normally in class, and in many cases they want to be treated normally, and they don't want that kind of personal information. In fact, I think sometimes too much personal information is a real problem.
Well, I must admit that sometimes I might feel as a teacher rather ready to talk about something in class, and I have to still be very careful with protecting them from my openness in class, which is not necessarily how they wanted to be best dealt with the situation. Definitely depends on the class size, but I personally have to really be very careful with that I don't quickly address something which might be in their private life or something. I'm usually a teacher who's happy to be open with my hobbies or likes or quirks even, but that's my thing, and I can't necessarily expect that from
But perhaps
other
that
students.
openness encourages those students to be open too. I think if you're an open book, then your students are actually more likely to confide things in you. And I think that as a teacher, we are often the only trusted adults in their lives.
Yeah, which is pretty scary. Yeah, and I have personally,
Very true.
I get good feedback from being an open
But
person in the classroom.
Mm.
Gary, yes, please go ahead.
yeah,
Gary,
I agree
please.
with James and you with you, Ralph, that we have to be. Yes, I agree with the things that you have mentioned. That we have to be open to our students, so they will be more open to us, so they can share with us anything that they want to share. So we are their second parents. So as their second parents, they must be comfortable with us, wherein they can tell us anything. But it's not always the case in class. There are students who are very secretive. They're not very open, so you have to be more diligent with them so you can help them better. And basically, we have to be more sensitive to these kids because they are usually not the person who talks. So they don't usually say things that they are not the person who talks about their feelings. So
Mm.
being more sensitive to them, especially if they are too quiet. So we have to be more aware of them.
I mean, I think this is actually where teaching with technology is really helpful. For example, just the other day, with my tutor group, because I hadn't got time to talk to all 20 of them on a one-to-one basis, so I sent them a very simple Google form with some fairly open questions, and the feedback I got was instant, amazing, and really showed their feelings at the moment. And I think sometimes technology allows you to reach out to 20 people in a way and get feedback in a way that you couldn't otherwise get, you know?
That's true.
Um, and I do think that, you know, based on that Google form, I'm going to talk to some of those students and, you know, talk about their feelings and things, because sometimes actually the technology depersonalizes things a little bit, but also these are things they would have liked to have told you, but they, of course, they don't want to shout out in class.
Yeah, that is very. We have to be very careful about what we know about the students, and getting to know them personally helps. And I think
Mm,
in smaller classes, getting to know each other also helps.
mhm,
Um, if we talk about students with special needs, I think inclusion has all shown us that um, responsibility and empathy goes up. Yeah,
mhm,
if students with special needs are there,
mhm,
and but yeah, you it's very difficult if you come across a private part or a piece of information
mhm,
which is suddenly in the room, and you have to address it, but you have to be very gentle and not judging.
mhm,
And what I can say in Thailand here is that it's a cultural thing to not talk about parents.
mhm,
Like there is this funny thing that you do not disclose your parents' name as a Thai student, because then
mhm,
the other students will say silly things with your parents' name, which
Wow.
mhm,
we as adults find that pretty funny or amusing. but they really get offended to the point where I've seen students shut down when parents get just mentioned. Yeah.
Oh wow, I think that is a peculiar Thai thing. I mean, I wouldn't.
It is, yes, I
Yeah.
believe it is. But it is
Um,
also quite cruel that some students just, if they know their parents' name, that they do that. And
right.
usually, if you're a healthy student and a confident student, you just, you don't care. But
Mm,
somebody might just have a stone face, but still be very hurt inside.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, as I
Eric,
say, I think that is quite unique to Thai culture because knowing who your parents are by itself isn't enough for most other cultures to cause any offence. Although in Malaysia, I have noticed that if a set of family is divorced, that can be a source of embarrassment. Whereas Europe tends to be more open. What about the US, Eric? Are they children fairly open about divorces and things?
Yeah, I mean, it's so common. It's actually more
Yeah.
common. It's. I've had people definitely be surprised. Oh my gosh, so and so's parents are still together. Like
Right.
that's more of a surprise. Yeah,
Okay.
um, yeah. But in Korea, then it's I've had people pretend that they
Yeah.
were still together when they weren't.
Mm.
It's like keep it from like a mother will see a lot of mothers on a regular basis, and it's a secret, and she's
Yeah.
pretending that she has that she and her husband are still together because it can be
Yeah.
so difficult. Yeah, it's really rough. I knew somebody who um, she had a baby, and shortly
Hmm.
after she had a baby, then she found out that her husband had been really lying to her about the finances, and
Hmm.
they broke up, and then he wanted to take the baby he wanted to stay
Yeah.
together, so he wanted to take the
Okay.
baby just to use that, and
Yeah.
she let him have the baby because then she could pretend that she never married. It was so sad.
Oh dear.
um yeah, yeah. And so imagine if she still had the child, and the father
Hmm.
wasn't there, and there's still that dynamic, that feeling that you can't
Yeah.
admit that things are the way they are. That can be really
That's right.
rough. Yeah.
Yeah.
what I find peculiar is with divorce issues or even just fights in families is that it sneaks up on kids.
Hmm.
They might feel happy one moment and don't think of their problems, and
Yeah.
then maybe because of a topic or just a thought which comes to across
Yeah.
they break down, and
Yeah.
they didn't have it common themselves even,
Hmm.
and I that's very tough, and I am very lucky that my parents are still together,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't know how I would have reacted when I had to go to a divorce in young years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even like to assume that everyone's parents are alive when I first meet a class, or who knows, like how would you hear that? You wouldn't
Mm.
necessarily. So I try to be careful with examples, and yeah, I don't want with situations where I assume that everybody even has two living parents. So I try to be careful with examples and.
I can hear the stream in the background. Maybe
Me too.
somebody.
Has anybody got? Everybody's using headphones, or are you using headphones, Ralph?
I am
Yeah,
using
I
headphones. I
can
hear
hear
the
Yeah.
you.
stream
Okay.
running,
Then that's really
but
weird. I don't know what caused
no,
it.
Mm.
I actually had the stream running in the background. I'm not sure if I was the cause.
Oh,
I
okay.
apologize. Now it's muted, but I
Okay.
have headphones on.
Gotcha. I couldn't tell the cord was dark. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Eric, if you heard that I'm a very open person, as you know me, and James said that many students might appreciate that, but what you say is actually an eye opener that you shouldn't think that both their parents are alive, which you are right, yeah, and I remember that I've asked this publicly in a classroom, like who whose parents are still together, who's not.
Mhm.
I think I should be more careful with that. Do you agree?
Yeah, that seems reasonable. You know, I find a lot out about my students when we have personal essays, and I know some teachers assign journals, and that kind of reminds me of what James was saying about how people can reveal things in less public ways. I feel like if somebody's got something that is itching to come out, then it would come out. It does come out sometimes in those personal essays or when teachers write journals. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's because I mean sometimes it's not even a situation where someone has family problems. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
significant personality trait that they're
Mm-hmm.
very introverted and they might have things that they would that they would share. They would connect with you, and you'd assume
Mm-hmm.
things that aren't. You'd assume that they want to be disconnected when in fact they want to connect, but it's just not their way to do it in the way that we would normally do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of challenges with these things, and you know we do have to be careful about what questions we ask and what students are sensitive to. Um, I can't imagine how we get into some of these issues and we find out people are sensitive to all sorts of things. For example, there's a computing language called Python,
Uh-huh.
and my student's been programming in it for years, right? But she's really, really, really afraid of actual Python. So when an image of a
Oh.
Python came up, she was properly scared.
Hmm.
I,
You know, it's
Yeah.
I'm very intrigued how you connect that now, but okay.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Python, the animal, or?
yeah, yeah. She just looked up for an image of Python, and of course, snakes
Mm.
came up, right?
Yeah.
And she was after the language, and then obviously it quite freaked her out.
Yeah. I knew someone who was similarly afraid of lizards, like
Mm,
the tiniest exposure. So she flipped through a science book, just flipping through the pages with it like super fast, and one of them flashed by her, and she closed the book and cried.
oh dear.
Yeah.
What age was that student?
College. That was a college friend. I don't know about James's, but that was a college friend.
17.
Yeah.
Well,
Really?
I would really have to control myself to not initially maybe even giggle
I
or
know. I
but
know.
obviously if
I
somebody's crying, I'm right there understanding.
sure. But being in college, we were not as mature as we could have been about it. Yeah.
Mm. I mean, I think as teachers, we do react to the emotions in front of us, so we know when
Sure.
a student's serious, and I think that is a skill we develop as teachers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how many students I have hurt or offended, not even knowing that. I apologize to everyone out there who that happened to, but it wasn't ever intentionally. What I might want to say maybe before is that, well, you said, Eric, that a lot of couples get divorced in America and it
Yeah.
becomes kind of the norm. I think
Yeah.
it is very important for us to send a message that we will respect them with whatever troubles they have in their lives, and that we will
Mm,
have an open ear as far as our time allows. But
Mm.
for I remember when a kid cried, I can just give the class some task and talk to the kid outside for a minute or two. Gary said that when we talked beforehand, going live, that he has counseling at school. So
mm,
that is always a very good help.
Yeah.
yeah. I think we're very lucky in our school to have excellent counselling teams, and the ability to be able to refer a student to a counsellor is fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think we're very lucky in that respect.
Yes.
But in schools where they don't exist, you are the only counsellor they're going to get. And you know, particularly if they're in your tutor group,
Hmm.
then it can
Yeah.
be very challenging indeed.
Yeah. Psychology is
Very challenging. Yeah.
psychology is still not super accepted in Korea.
Right.
And so I feel really lucky that we have a counselor at all. But
Mm,
yeah, it's been great that we can send people to him and we definitely needed to sometimes.
mm.
Gary,
Yeah.
please, you have many things to say.
That's
You didn't get through yet.
Interesting.
Did you say Eric or Gary?
I meant Gary. I might have
Oh,
said
gosh. Just
else.
checking, just
Gary.
checking. Okay.
Shall we move the topic on to
Oh,
what can we do
okay.
to support
What I
parents who are
heard from
neglecting them?
What can we do to support what?
Support parents who are neglecting their children to some
Hmm.
extent.
You mean support the children in the absence of the parental care, or actually
Oh.
sort of get how can we get parents more involved? What are you thinking?
Well, I think that's a good open question. I think
Yeah.
I mean, ideally we'd try and re-engage the parents if we can,
Yeah.
but also what can we do to support those students in the immediate future? I mean,
If they,
I remember in my very first school, I saw a washing machine, and we didn't teach anything to do with washing, but what was actually happening was the school was washing the kids' clothes because they wouldn't get done at home.
Wow. Yeah.
well, that's a cool thing as a school to do, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, the other shock was I don't know how often you guys have been in cold climates, but snow days are a thing, right? Have you heard of
Right.
snow days where you
Yes.
send everybody
Yeah,
home?
I did. I did.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was like, okay, so it's a snow day, right? So why are we waiting till after lunch? And the head teacher said, well, the truth is we're waiting till after lunch because we know lunchtime is the only meal some of these kids are going to get.
Mm.
And
Wow.
these are quite shocking incidents, but you know, and even when we're in so-called better schools with high levels of thinking, the kind of neglect is different, but kids are often left with just the maids, right?
Yeah. There's I'd read a while back about someone who was going to college, but she was homeless. And
Mm,
I saw some video just the other day about of a girl who was homeless and doing her homework in
mm-hmm,
a thunderstorm.
mm-hmm,
She like barely sheltered. She was like hiding under something and doing her homework. And I mean, that's like amazing
mm-hmm,
dedication. But then sometimes kids, when they move on, they're still like that. And so there was a movement to keep the dorms open, college dorms
mm-hmm.
open during
Yeah,
breaks, because this person would just have no place to go to. So
mm-hmm,
yeah.
yeah. And it
I
is
might,
hard.
sorry, I might show a comment from our steady on watcher Adriana, who's coming to town soon, and she said that there's no manual for parenting, and the world is ever changing. Parent workshops are really helpful, but I'm talking about international school settings. So I believe three of us are parents as well, and
Yeah.
it's pretty. I can fully understand how embarrassing it can feel when, as a parent, you seem to not meet quite the standard, even though you,
Mm.
Eric, you've just said some really dramatic examples. Um, Kids cope with stuff, with hard stuff on the surface level so well, and we even if we are not aware how much they suffer. So I think it is very important to find the balanced way between asking the right question, giving them their space, not being too harsh on demanding work or demanding to be, on your best behavior all the time. And I find it funny that you need a driving license for a car or even a bicycle, but for parenting, you don't need to have any paper. Yeah.
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 You're talking about how we don't really know what's behind kids' behavior. So we don't, sometimes it might be easy to assume that there's not much behind it, and you might be annoyed. I just read something the other day about, and maybe it's really common, I don't know, I thought it was pretty cool, that a student seems to be doing things for attention, then take the word attention and switch it with connection. They're doing things because, yeah.
I mean,
And
I
that,
would follow that up and say that one of the tricks I learned was that if a kid wants attention, give them good attention and ignore bad behavior. And for some kids, that's a very, very effective management strategy. But the other thing I learned at some of these tough schools is they don't want any quarter. They want you to treat them like they are the most academically able, hold them to the highest standards,
yeah.
and and make that class that bubble. The second place I went to was a very, very hard-working, outstanding school, and they had literally high walls. They bussed most of the kids in, and it was literally to make a very clear separation between home life and school life. When you
Wow.
heard some of the stories about the home lives, you were like, I couldn't tell that from the class. And they don't want you to know that. They want to feel that they're at school and they are these people. But I would say if you do have these students, give them an opportunity to do that work independently, but maybe independently at school, in the library. You know, try not to set work that has to be done at home with resources or anything, because they might not have it at home, you know.
Yeah.
And I think homework is definitely has always been an area of contention. And my view is that when you set independent work, make sure that it's doable, and you're not trying to encourage them to do things that they couldn't do in class. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, before I welcome Seti officially, thank you for being so patient, Seti. I have a question about when we give these not necessarily special but individualized treatment to our students. How do we explain that to their peers if we do not want to disclose the issue behind?
Well, actually, what you do is you offer it to every student, but you know there's one or two who are going to take you up on it, right?
Yeah.
That's the oldest trick in the book, really.
Well, it's still good to repeat those.
Yes.
Okay, sad that Seti is dropping out.
Well, basically, it's like
Go ahead, Gary.
okay. Well, in my formal school, we used to have we call it personalized education. So it's not just the academics. We also address the students' need. For example, we have to know where they are coming from, their background, so we can treat them properly, or we can deal with them properly. So if something happens, for example, if she's crying and she needs attention, so usually we allow them to get out of the room, and then we call the guidance counselor to attend to the person, to the student. And then later on I'll just make a follow up from the guidance counselor. So students know that we do allow students to have this moment wherein they cannot control their feelings because they are having a bad day. Because we all know that everyone has a bad day. So they know that this is part of how we treat everyone. So we call it personalized education. So that's how we do them. So it's not really a special treatment for students, but uh, part of part of how we handle students. That's how we do things in our school.
And I
I
think
am.
in our international context, I think one of our biggest concerns, particularly with younger students, is that often it's just the maid who's looking after them. What kind of issues do we think that brings in? Can I direct that to you, Eric?
Well, yeah, I feel like with our in Korea the school is so important.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not even the maid. Like I know it's not uncommon for people to send their kids overseas to stay with distant relatives or people that aren't even relatives, just so that they can be in an English speaking country.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's extremely common because in my school, it happens outside of international schools as well. But in my school, you have to have lived out of the country for I think 3 years
Oh,
to
right.
qualify to get in if you're Korean, which most of our kids are Korean. And so how that happens, that's not really. It's you can meet the requirement whether it was a cool situation or not. And a lot of the things that I hear about are kids, the first time they were away from home, the first time they were away from mom and dad, all of a sudden they're in a place where they really don't know anybody,
Mm-hmm.
and their whole job is to exist and learn English, for a period of years. So
Mm-hmm.
that can be pretty difficult. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the story is I became more responsible, and sometimes the story
Mm-hmm.
is I started blowing everything off and I became rebellious. And it just
Mm-hmm.
depends on what was in the mix before they went, and then how things were when they went. And
Mm-hmm.
um, it's we also have students who have a place in town and their
Mm-hmm.
parents aren't in town, and that if it's a senior, it's not really they're old enough technically, and that's fine, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still a little unusual. They're still still pretty young.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's because the parents. I mean, these to get into this school, people are going to be pretty well off, and they can afford to have options like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you talk about far-reaching countries, we get a lot of Korean students
Mm.
and it's quite normal for the mother to be living with them and the father to occasionally visit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And yeah, that does become a norm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the distant, hardworking father is a very common thing here, whether they're
Mm.
physically distant or not.
Mm.
Yeah, again, I must really be very careful. I would sometimes maybe say, "Oh, that's sad," or fall rather not into obvious pity, but inside I pity their situation. But what they really need is more empathy, more understanding, more loving
Mm.
attention, and um, yeah, it's we have to be in charge of our
But
feelings.
Eric,
Point.
Yeah, Gary, is that?
is it
Go ahead, Gary.
cultural? Because uh, I find it interesting to know if is that the culture in Korea.
Is what the
Most
culture?
of the fathers are away.
Well, when I say away, they're
Is
working.
it
They're working a
really?
lot. Yeah, so the culture could be
Yes.
that the father
Uh-huh.
is physically around but working very late. That's changing more, but
Mhm.
traditionally, then the employees aren't supposed to leave work before the boss, and the boss tends to stay very late. And it might even be
Right.
unusual. I know someone who I knew him when he was in college, and then I knew him when he got a job, and he was working in an office, and he was staying late only because, not because he had a lot of work to do, but only because the boss was staying late. And seemed like there was a high probability that while my friend was playing games just to pass the time while he waited for the boss to go home, that the boss
Mm.
was playing games on his computer so that he could stay late enough so that he would still have the employees' respect. And so, but either way, like there's a culture of staying late, and the laws are actually changing as far as how late you can work. But it
Mm-hmm.
starts at an early age. The academies, the private academies here, it's like the pressure on education. That they've got academies that run late at night. Kids will exit school. First off, most high schools have a requirement that you stay until 10 p.m. studying.
Whoa.
Yeah, and then after that, some kids would go to
Wow,
these
that's
academies,
really late.
and so they actually had to have a law that academies had to close at 10, and sometimes they would bust academies that were teaching later than 10. So,
Whoa.
that's how they start when they're young, and then they go, they get jobs
Mm.
and go to work late, and so then if you're doing that, then you don't spend much time with the kids.
Well, that can't be really good. Whether socially, I don't know. I'm really
Yeah.
blown away about
No,
that.
it doesn't seem great.
I
Well,
think there are cracks starting to show because of that, right?
Yeah.
And stress levels of people.
Yeah, and things are changing a little bit, but it's slow. It's
Mm,
very slow.
mm,
I apologize to everybody. We have to deal with some technical issues today more than usual, but we will all learn from that. Welcome, Seti. Could you follow up on our discussion so far?
Yeah, no, I've been trying to follow as much as possible. As you said, there's been some lag. Hopefully, that's not reflected on the YouTube live. But I actually liked what you said about the laws changing, because that reminded me of a couple years back. I think it was in Europe where some laws. I don't quote me on this, but I actually think it was Germany, where laws were passed that an employer is no longer allowed to send emails during the weekend.
Wow.
all right, wow.
So I think that those are the sort of game changers. Like once you sort of put things in place where you say, okay, look, people go home at 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever that time is, but once they're home, if they choose to open their emails, that's their choice. If they choose to not do that and spend their time and be present at home with family, then I think that should be their choice. And we shouldn't force them, because I think that's one of the things that I don't like about sort of, I love technology. I love the freedom it's given us, the access to information. The downside of that is we never switch off. We can never turn off. You get an email at 7, 8, 9 in the evening. It's on your phone. You open it. It's just, there is no more disconnect. Whereas I still remember the days when, if someone tried to call you and you weren't home,
Yeah.
you didn't answer the phone.
Yeah,
That was
you
it.
just didn't get it.
Now we all
Yeah.
carry our phones with us. And I think that ties in with sort of these busy parents as well, because a lot of our, I'm thinking international schools, very successful parents, very busy, but how much time do they still have for their family? Very little. And so then that brings me to what you were talking about, James, about you were saying setting independent homework. And I would go a step further and say, how about we just get rid of homework altogether? I don't know what everyone else thinks about that, but
I think reading below 7 or 8, I don't think there's any need for any other homework. Up to about age 10.
Absolutely.
Okay, but in age 10, grade 10, then there should be homework.
I think
I
then
think
I'm afraid it's inevitable to pass the exams. Yeah.
I want to kind of go a bit back to the social media because
see, but there, James,
I remember
I would beg to argue how much of the homework being set today, and I'm not saying anything about you or any of us who are setting homework, but how much of that homework is being set for the sake of homework, and how much of that homework is being set to prepare our students to help them forward. If that's the goal, great. If it's about helping them forward, if it's about, getting them to prepare themselves, brilliant. But how many teachers are sending home homework just because they have to send home homework? It's not functional. It doesn't, they could do without.
I mean, I do think for exam classes it's required, and that would be year 10 and above. Below that, realistically, we set very little in my department.
Yeah, see, and that's, again, I mean, I think that's where it's important to have these discussions and also to tweak it, because setting homework is good, but not for the sake of homework. It's to revise, to study, to. I mean, my whole channel is called Flipped Classroom. A flipped classroom means that you do the work at home as a video and you come prepared with questions. That in itself is a form of homework. However, it's homework. What is homework and what is not homework?
Yeah. I mean, I would say flipped
flipped
learning is homework, and I use it quite regularly to give more coding time.
Yeah. exactly, but
students-
that is not the homework I have an issue with. I have an issue with the homework where there is repetitive worksheets being given out. That is absolute waste of time.
I do agree with homework policies should be more on the defending side of the students. That I think I've heard that in chats we had before, that there's a maximum time every student should spend with homework. If some task is longer than 20 minutes, then something in the task is wrong, or something wrong there. But please excuse me that I try to push this again, because I know that most of us are familiar with common sense media and how we train our kids to be responsible media users. And I think that a lot of stress comes from social media, and more parents got cited into meet with admin because there's a misbehavior or an issue with social media. I mean, we had just recently a kid tries to be funny on a chat and somehow finds the wrong words and is somehow socially outcasted quickly. Yeah? So how do we deal as teachers, even especially for teachers who are not common sense media teachers?
I think you're touching on a brilliant subject there. Sorry to interrupt. I think you're touching on a brilliant subject there, because just this week I was reading up on I was reading through the news. I don't know how many of you have seen the news report of this, was it 21, 22-year-old who applied for a job and then was literally named and shamed all over social media this week. Has anyone seen that news report?
No.
No, what was that about?
Okay, so I think this ties in with what Ralph is saying, is that basically the way that you apply for a job, first thing your employer does is they'll search for you online. They'll go through your social media, they'll go through all your public posts. So what happened was this, I can't remember her name, but basically she found this media company, which was a social media marketing company. And so she, applied for a job. They were looking for innovative people who did things differently. Instead of actually, asking her to apply for the job, come in for the interview, they took one of her public pictures, one of her beach pictures, they cropped it all off, posted it on their social media, and just shamed her for, like, you're applying for a professional job, don't have pictures like this on your socials. And I think there's a bit of a double lesson in that. First of all, I think that company was wrong. They could not have been more wrong to do that. On the other hand, it's also a great lesson for our students, because it tells our students what we've been telling them, once it's online forever. That then ties in with this overuse of social media. Social media has become such an important part of our lives. So many parents are spending all their time on social media. So many of our parents are constantly posting pictures of their children instead of interacting with their children. And so the question then is, where is that line between what is acceptable, what is not acceptable? How much time do we spend? How much time do we spend offline? How do we communicate that to parents? And I mean, this week, seeing that news report, it just reminded me of, my goodness, the times we live in are so different now. Our students are growing up in that. And it's just, I think it's terrible what happened to her. So yeah, I mean, I would say look it up, because it's actually a really good reminder for our students about their digital footprint, their digital tattoo, so to say.
Well, I feel like there's a whole generation that has been open in a similar way. And so it may become so that people are less shocked by these things. It may become, there may be a time in 10 years or even less, where probably maybe not quite that short, but where that would have no impact. They'd be like, why are you bothering? Everybody has that, because there's this common level of desensitization of this thing, in the era of Instagram, that it may, because think about all the things that we're not shocked by now that people would have been shocked by 20 years ago. So it makes sense right now. I think that we're in a window at the very least where it is a huge professional hazard. But I also think that it's just not gonna. People are gonna be like, yeah, that's that we're going to the culture. Every culture is going to get used to having their stupid years available online, because we all have had stupid years, and some of us were lucky enough not to have them in an era where that was so easy to do.
But I also want to say that sometimes we behave stupid and we get away with it. Yeah, I might have a Freudian slip here in this life.
But it does show how.
But I seem to get away with it. But in some of these cases, without any explanation, it blows up so big that somebody's life is destroyed, and there seems to be no reason to it.
You're right. It's very
Why
strange.
can I? Yeah. Why can I misbehave and I
mean,
don't
look at what's happening with cancel culture now. I mean, I know we're diversing the topic, but
With what culture? Did you say what kind of culture?
cancel culture. So
Cancel.
where you see cancel culture. So it's this
but
new,
what is that?
it's this new trend on social media. I mean, YouTube in particular and Twitter. It's where people go into someone's social media history and find things that they can then highlight in order to cancel a person and make their opinion no longer valuable.
Wow. Okay.
And in some cases, this includes like reporters. They'll go back 10, 15 years to where they made an inappropriate comment, or maybe it was something that they would now be deeply ashamed of.
Yeah.
Because in those 10, 15 years, they've evolved and they've grown. And that is then highlighted, and these people, they're losing their jobs left and right, and their opinions are no longer valuable. And it's this new trend that is just happening left and right, and it's just.
But that happened with politicians all the time. I mean, if you run for a public office, there are we see that from diverse Netflix series that there are whole teams set up to search through your past for any bad things.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a new time we live in, and I think with that new time also comes increased time spent on these new media, and that is then impacting our students. I mean, I've seen plenty of people who, I mean, even just a simple dinner. We're talking like at the beginning of this, when I was still in the backstage, you were talking about, families maybe not having parents at home, or separated families. I'd say that now we have a lot of families that are still a family unit where the child barely sees the parent, even though they're in the same room. The child is staring down at a device and the parent is staring at their device. The interaction has gone missing. I mean, you go to a restaurant and you'll see a family of 4, both kids are on the iPad, mom's on the phone, dad's on the phone, dinner is served, they all look at each other, they start eating, and they're back to their devices. That is, and I think that's where we come in, and it's not the big finger and saying you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, but it's how aware are these parents of their behavior, because we live in this tech world. I mean, we're all tech enthusiasts, or we wouldn't have these shows that we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it says a lot when you hear sort of the people like, your Bill Gates and your Zuckerbergs, and that they don't have these devices, that they have device-free rooms. These are the people, they know how damaging it can be. I think with the non-tech people, we need to.
I actually switch off
we need to reach the non-techie people.
And it is interesting. The most techie amongst us are the ones who are reading the books, who are switching off our notifications after a certain hour, who are scheduling our emails so that we don't disturb people's weekends. And I think that's a new type of evangelism, isn't it? That we actually have to say, well, you have the device now actually use it in the way it's intended. Well, in the way it should be used, I guess.
What I might say, Seti, you are a very, very smart man and dedicated and very principled, I think. But I can literally also shout at myself for when G plus was still a thing. I remember that I told my mom, and I was only 2 weeks at home at that time, that I have to work, and what I meant is connect with people on G plus in order to boost the GEGs. And I question that. I question myself as well now. Was that really important? Should I have maybe not done that? And G plus is dead now. You know, who?
No, but and I totally agree with that because Ralph, I'm in the exact same situation. I've got constant comments coming in from the channel, constantly. Now that is where I then need to make a decision. Am I replying to that comment now? Am I, scheduling in time to do it later? And I think we need to make that decision for ourselves, and each and every one of us needs to decide, when do I switch off? But we need to remember to switch off. And I think that decision is a personal choice, the same way that some people happily stay in an extra 2 hours after work to do some extra work. Other people prefer to go home, put the kids to bed, and then they do their lesson plans. It's a personal decision. The only thing that I'm worried about is that the non-techie people might not be aware of just how much time they're spending online or how much emphasis they're putting on it. Why? Because it's become this habit. And I mean, I'm very aware of it, and I do spend too much time. I spend an awful lot of time on my device. And I think we can all tell when and where we spend too much time, because we know that we're seeing it, we're noticing it, because we're also aware of the impact it has. Whereas I think when you're growing up now, and these are the behaviors you're seeing, I've had parents ask me, how do I stop my child from spending all this time on the iPad? And then the first question I ask is, what do you do when you have a free minute? Well, guess what the answer is?
Yeah.
It's on the iPhone, it's on the iPad. The same goes with the question of, how do I make my child read more? Because back to homework, I think every child should read every day. That's not homework. They should all read, have books. Books are an amazing gift that you should give to every child. And I'm saying this as a tech enthusiast. I will never say no to a book.
Yeah.
A real, actual book. If my child comes to me and they say, can I buy this book? The answer is yes. It is never, oh, why? No, the answer is yes, it's a book. Yes, of course, get it. And so that brings me back to, I think when I get that question from parents, how do I make my child read more? And my answer is, well, how often do you read? What are they seeing? Because we can tell them as much as we want. Their number one hero is you, the parent, the guardian. You are their number one. You are the person they're going to use as their model. That's their frame, their example. So if you're face down on your phone, as soon as they have one, that's what they do.
Yeah,
I don't know if anyone else has an opinion on that, or
I feel like the way that you can get anyone, a book versus a device is gonna lose the showdown. So the best way to get anyone to read, even myself, is to make a device not an option. So I'll read on the train. I'll bring a book on the train. The device is an option there too, but for some reason that works for me. But in class, then I make sure that the book is the most interesting thing. No devices. We're not doing anything else. You can't sleep. So, and there's a book right there, and we're going to try to make it a good one. And if that book isn't, something you like, if it turns out, well, then I encourage you to switch it and get another book immediately that you might like a little better, you might hate a little less. And so by making the book the most interesting option, then students, or anybody can get time to read.
Yeah.
My dear participants, we hit the 5 minutes mark, and I need to kind of get full circle around to helping our kids without the necessary support of home. We haven't completely gone away from it, but to go back into our class to figuring out where we can help. Maybe I start with you, Gary. Give us your best tips with encouraging students to stay strong and be in contact, in touch with their emotions and feelings, and sharing it when it's too much. What are your best tips, Gary?
Okay, I think this was mentioned by Seti last time that we had in the previous session wherein we have to build relationship with kids so they will be more comfortable to us, and they will open if they will come to us in case they need an advice or if they have a problem. So we need to be open to our students so we can get to know them better, at the same time help them better.
Thank you very much, Gary. Being empathetic, having time. James, we go clockwise. Thank you.
I mean, for me, I think it is delivering those lessons to the very best of your ability, making the lessons engaging, and being that open person that students can relate to. I actually think that if you're teaching wonderful lessons, that is in some cases the best relief they're going to get that day, and at least will take their mind off things.
That is very, very beautifully said. Beautiful. Seti, please go ahead.
I mean, that was amazing. I couldn't agree more. I would say make sure that you as a teacher create a non-judgmental environment that's welcoming to your students. Because the one thing I think we need to keep in mind is that we might be the only person they see that day with open arms. They might go home. We don't know their home situation. There might not be someone there. There might be someone there who's, not exactly the person they want to see. So if we can be that one spark of light that they see that day, then that.
Seti and James, really, really touching. How can you possibly top that, dear Eric? Sorry, you don't need to top it. Just add something.
Yeah, that's fine.
You're a very empathetic guy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I feel like being a good person, simply being a good person, because people are less than good sometimes without being bad. By just being absent, by not being engaged enough, then they're not being a role model. They're not being someone that kids can identify with, look up to, want to follow, and by being the kind of person that you would have appreciated as a role model when you were a kid, it's not going to be what every single person needs, but by being the best role model you can be, an example of who they might want to be, then you're offering them an option that maybe they're not seeing at home.
Eric, thank you very much. I think it was a beautiful topic, and very, very many beautiful things have been said. I'm proud of our jobs and that we have a big reach into our classrooms, and not to praise us too much, but we all know how much responsibility we have, and I'm happy to say that all of us are doing it with love. And I guess that is another Thirsty Thursday with Google Educators groups, and I am very, very happy to hopefully see you all next Thursday. For all the on-watchers or the ones who watch us later, thank you.
Who's hosting? Who's hosting next week?
Oh yeah. I tried my best this week.
It's Gary's turn. We're going around in a circle.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. And we say goodbye. And please lift your glasses. Thursday.
Here's to
Everybody.
Gary.
Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.